Let me just make sure everything is everything and what will be will be. I'm just checking the setting, make sure the mic is the right mic. This it? Yes. Okay, the mic is good. Thank you, everyone. All the way down to that. All right. Good evening, everyone. This is BroDiallo. Just going to, before we get started this evening, I know everybody wants an update. BroDiallo been off the board. Stop referring to myself in third person. That's corny as hell. Anyway, I've been off the board for a while. If you've been looking for the normal broadcast time and places for the BroDiallo show, there's a lot going on, some changes, ain't the damn thing happening. But I'll just say, if you were a routine listener at my regular broadcast on the radio show Q4 Radio here in Chicago, you will know that I was having a lot of technical difficulties. Q4, as you also know, if you've been with me for a while, had to shut things down during the pandemic. And frankly, the from my point of view, in terms of my needs and my positions and my role, never really recovered from the pandemic. So I was constantly dealing with issues and frustrations and lack of resources, and the facilities have gone downhill. And I kind of thought to myself during the pandemic, everybody's suffering during the pandemic, so I'm not suffering on my own. So I'm going to endure this suffering, try to maintain the BroDiallo show. And after the pandemic, things will start to pick up. And frankly, things have not picked up from the pandemic. And very honestly, I was ready to just wrap it all up. In the BroDiallo show, and kind of even in this whole component of what I really call advocacy and education for revolutionary ideology, revolutionary cultivation, revolutionary Pied Piper, and revolutionary struggle and organization, in terms of being a voice out there, being a person who creates Pan-Africanist and radical media. I'm like, look, I can wrap this whole shit up. Everything at Q4 wasn't like it was supposed to be. There's some issues behind the scenes at Black Power Media. I don't know if Jared and Geechee want to talk publicly about it. Those brothers are great. Those brothers are a couple of really good brothers. No issues between us and Earn Your Liberation, but the larger Black Power Media family and community. There were some issues there where, I was to say, I could just wrap that up too, just walk away, because just a little background on how I came to the BroDiallo show and this whole media component where I, produce and create media, which is something I hadn't done. I was a writer. I wrote for magazines. I would write and publish articles. I kept a pretty decent blog in writing, but most of my work in terms of the struggle was done grassroots, organizational work. And, because I'm not really, I would do public speaking, but speaking based on my other efforts and my experiences, but never like just selecting topics and issues and all of that. So I got invited for an interview based on the work I was doing in the community. Someone was like, yo, can you come on my show? It was a show called 0 to 100, locally produced out of basically Chicago and Milwaukee. Said, can you come on the show and be a guest on the show? And so I'm like, yeah, sure, come on. And I talked about what I was doing and talked about some issues. It was kind of my very first time ever really being on a podcast or anything of that nature, or radio. I've done radio interviews, but again, it wasn't really about what are your thoughts, what is your analysis, what are your conclusions. I would do interviews to promote whatever I was doing. We were on network television promoting our vegan restaurant and vegan catering business, promoting some community effort, Green Teens, and we had the Open Door program. So media is not strange to me, But going on like this type of media, social media, podcast, radio, or even television to articulate my ideas was a relatively new phenomenon. This was years ago. And I got invited back. They were like, you were really popular. We got really positive feedback. So I came back and was basically an official co-host of that show. That particular promoter and producer had issues with the radio station, and he basically pulled the plug on the show and moved it to Milwaukee. And I wasn't about to go to Milwaukee to be an unofficial co-host of the show. And so I was at home for a couple of weeks, and the founder of the radio station Q4 contacted me and was like, would you be interested in doing your own show? And just basically the same stuff you were discussing and issues you were discussing and basically was like, well, we needed a voice like this. So I'm like, yeah, I agree, because in my own organization, I always felt one of the biggest issues to organizing African people for liberation work, it was not the lack of money. It was not even the lack of commitment or the lack of bodies. It was always ideology. People being able to really comprehend the work we're doing and really able to grasp the mentally and intellectually grasp the scope of what we were doing, and getting African people to move beyond demonstration, protest, and activism towards real revolution, towards real Black power. So I'm like, yeah, I think this is something I always spoke up for and advocated for and will promote and push for other people to do. We need revolutionary media in the arts, in literature, and even in radio. And so I was flattered to be invited and enthusiastic, and that was the birth of the BroDiallo show. It wasn't anything I planned to do. It was something I was given the opportunity and invited to do, and I embraced it and did my damnedest. So all that up till now, and as I've been doing this for years and years, I think I'm coming up on 7 years doing the BroDiallo show, from that origin kind of stumbling into it. And I try to do an assessment, and basically the rewards and the payoff versus the cost, where in many a times when I'm doing this show, I'm basically paying to do the show. I don't get enough adequate support to do the show, so I have to come out and give resources, where my own resources basically paying to work, literally paying to work, instead of getting paid to work or getting just enough support to break even, operating this at a deficit and doing this at a deficit, and then you have people come at you as if intellectual work is not work, as if, what I'm doing here with the BroDiallo show doesn't qualify as work or labor. So I'm like, what is the point? And so when I just disappeared for a couple of weeks, I'm reassured that there is a point to this. I've gotten several people inboxing me, texting me, reaching out to me, asking me, first of all, am I okay? Yeah, I'm physically fine. I can still do cartwheels. Yeah, I'm physically fine. Mentally, I'm fine. It's just I did lose a bit of motivation, and I did start really questioning, could there be a better expenditure of my time? Especially with the technical problems going on with the BroDiallo show. I mean, the only thing in terms of this media stuff that's really working is me and Skip. I think Skip and I are in a really good place. No complaints. It's going well. So with the Rational Radicals, but as far as the BroDiallo show, and that came right sandwiched with my issues with Q4 were going on for several weeks. And just as I was trying to figure out what to do with that, the EY or the Black Power Media shit started bubbling up. And the good thing is, I reached out to Jared, and Geechee and I had a conversation, and then Jared went and did his reaching out and did what he do in terms of speaking to the issues there. And like I said, I don't want to talk about Black Power Media business over here, but if y'all want us to talk about it, or if Jared and Geechee want to talk about that over on Black Power Media, we can. But anyway, long story short, I'm going to continue this because, like I said, just disappearing for a few weeks and the response I got, I see that the show is valued. I'm going to work harder in terms of exposure, in terms of generating support and revenues to try to sustain it. You know, I'm going to do that because I am genuinely touched and I am genuinely motivated by the outpouring. So, I'm back on board. I don't know if I'll be back at the Q4 radio station. I'm going to have to get some extra things here to try to set up if I can do it from here or find a new location. But I am going to commit to sustaining the BroDiallo show and setting a. But for now, for the time being, I will do it 7 to 9 on Mondays, and as I see, you know, uh, what we can do. So that's that. If you have any more specific questions, I'll try to open up for the questions and try to answer those. But that's where we are. Shout out to everybody I've got some long-term supporters who've been with me from day one, giving both monetary and, mental and emotional support. Shout outs. Because, if you watch my show, I do get backlash. I don't come on here and give much lip service to the beefs, because like Kwame Ture said, you only fight with people who have power. People who don't have power have no business fighting from each other, because what are we going to win? Let's say you defeat. So I don't like bumping heads with people without power. And I know that might sound contradictory because I also don't bite my tongue. I believe names should be named. I don't talk about people indirectly. I don't say certain people out there or certain groups out there. If I'm talking about a person or if I'm talking about a group, I'm going to say that the group. If I'm talking about an individual, I'm going to say the individual's name. If I'm talking about a larger phenomenon in community or society, I might say in non-specific people who do this, or individuals or organizations do that. But I do name names, and that's not to generate conflict, but just to be sincere and honest. And another rule that I have is you don't do descending attacks. You don't attack or target or belittle people, those organization groups or populations or individuals that are beneath you on the social hierarchy. But I believe anyone above me on the social, economic, political, ideological, racial hierarchy is fair game, and those lateral to me are also fair game. So I do have rules about who I will call out and who I will condemn and so on and so forth. But again, I'd like to think across almost a decade of doing this, there's been because I've also been accused of being unprincipled for calling people's religions male chauvinist murder cults and saying other horrible things. And it just, again, it continues to blow my mind when people are mad at me for the things I say, and they never come to me and say these things aren't true. When I talk about atrocities committed by Islam and Christianity, when I talk about the enormous, incalculable amount of resources, from cold cash money to our time, the commitment of our time that these religions have extracted from us, or these cults have taken from us, and me calling it out, I never get people to specifically say, yo, these atrocities you mentioned didn't happen, or these abuses that you mentioned didn't happen, or these doctrine or practices or dogmas or belief systems are not within this belief system. They're not there. They don't come and challenge me to say that I'm wrong. They say I'm wrong for saying it, but what I said was not wrong. And it gets exhausting. So, but I guess that's what caffeinated green tea is for when you get exhausted. You know what I'm saying? Shit. I'll rest up and come right back. But in the arena of ideas, I think if we can't be open and direct on the ideological arena, how are we going to be that in the real world, in the physical space? But anyway, all that to say is I'm back. I don't have any intentions on leaving or withdrawing. I just coming up with a new path forward. That's what I'm trying to figure out. And that's what I'm working on. I'm working on a path forward, and I'm working on how to build more securely and build in a more stable way. But there's no intention to leave or withdraw or even reduce what I've been doing in terms of the BroDiallo show, BroDiallo broadcast, Rational Radical, and Earn Your Liberation. So that's that. And I was asked by a couple of my supporters to kind of explain what the blood clot is going on. I guess that's it. I hope I've explained it well. I hope we can move on. I'm still getting used to this new setup. And that's that. So, and again, I'll open up later for questions. I mean, we can do our normal questions, or you can ask me about what's going on. But I think I pretty much said everything that I'm able to say. And if I think of something else, I'll say it again. But anyway, this is the BroDiallo broadcast, official. And I'm glad to be back. I guess I don't really need any reintroduction. There's a few things I wanted to talk about. One thing was weird that I was reading over Diddy's accusations. Because Diddy is now being targeted or exposed for his long history of abuse. And I was reading something, and I've never been a P. Diddy fan. I've never listened to any of let me just say, the only shit I know about Diddy is because I was always a Biggie Smalls fan from day one. I was always a fan of Biggie. And of course, it was kind of hard to enjoy Biggie without, executive producers all in videos. I mean, that's one thing Suge Knight ever said that I agree with. Was, he was all in the videos and all that shit. And I'm like, well, if you're going to take Biggie, you got to get a sprinkling of Diddy. Pause. And it's just, that was the thing. So the only thing I know about Diddy is the shit he did with Biggie. And Biggie had a song on his album, his posthumous album, Life After Death. The World Is Filled. And it's got Carl Thomas, what's that other dude's name? Too Short, and Diddy all have a verse. And Diddy, reading Diddy's, the official filing of damages, where the victim or their lawyers or the two of them sit down and write down the complaint. And they have to say specific. That's another thing we have to remember, especially about abuse cases and sexual abuse cases, because what's his name? Brother Polite is running a scam where he was arrested. And what happens a lot, and I worked in prisons and I worked in trauma centers. And most trauma centers also have a separate trauma center. I've explained this before. Like, if you work in a level 1 trauma center, they deal with gunshot wounds, stabbing, car accidents, industrial accidents, a lot of farming accidents. Farming is extremely dangerous, much more dangerous than being a cop. But another section was you'd have that sectioned off, but then you'd have basically the sexual assault arena, and this thing, they called it a rape kit. But it wasn't like a kit, like a little box with the things, but it was basically a special room with a stretcher and an exam room. Because when someone is assaulted, their body is a crime scene. So you ever go to a crime scene out in the world and you see they tape off everything, red tape, and people, they can't just, no one can walk. They try to clear everyone out. It's a crime scene. So if someone come and they're stabbed or they're shot, or they got an open fracture from a fall or a car accident, everybody descends on them. You got, especially if there's some type of respiratory or collapsed lungs, you got the respiratory therapists, you got the nurses, you got the doctors, you got the x-ray tech, you got the billing and insurance person with their clipboard circling. Literally, I've seen them searching through the pockets of dead people looking for their insurance card. So you got the accountants, you got family members a lot of time. uh, or witnesses or people or friends, and everybody's descending on this person who's in severe distress. And you literally have people putting tubes in lungs, tubes down throats, tubes in arms, a fluoroscope going. You have the orthopedics pulling at their phones. It's a if you've ever, and I hope you never see this unless it's your job, a trauma, a level 1 trauma emergency. I've seen it hundreds of times, but it's a little different when it's an assault victim because, again, their body is a crime scene. But anyway, and they're using the body to collect evidence and build their case. And a lot of times it could be traumatic, re-traumatizing. I don't know the technical term, but first you're assaulted, and then you go in for the police and the medical care and the police investigation, and you have to literally reliving it. So anyway, the policy of prosecutors in the negotiation with abusers is they will negotiate that down. They will talk to the victim and the victim's loved ones, especially if it's a minor, the parents, and they will talk to the perpetrator. And so what happens a lot, there are a lot of very violent, vicious predators out here who have charges that are nowhere near, who have charges that don't anywhere approach what they actually did. And we understand somebody can do a break into a pawn shop, which I know somebody who like break into a pawn shop and they get a good lawyer and they get it knocked down to vandalism. And so I knew someone who tried to break into a pawn shop and was trying to get through, but couldn't get through the iron bars. But they did a lot of damage to the building, and the police came and they ran off and all this stuff. And so basically, it was attempted burglary. And his mama got him a lawyer, and the lawyer negotiated the attempted burglary down, and he basically got charged with defacing a building or vandalism. And the only thing that stopped him from fully robbing the spot was he just couldn't get through the bars or the gate or whatever. So people negotiate crimes down, which I think is good. I think is wonderful. I think it is great that those crimes can be negotiated down, you depending on the criminal. And I think if you are charged with the full extent of the law and you end up doing time, and only thing incarceration does is make people greater and more intense criminals by and large. So anyway, all that to say is the prosecutors like to negotiate down sometimes sexual abuse or sexual assault cases because they don't want the victim to have to testify. And oftentimes they fear that they won't be able to get the cooperation of the victim. Also in domestic violence, they won't the victim. So you got a 14, 15-year-old girl that would have to get on the stand and speak to a defense attorney who's going to dissect everything about her life and make her walk through every single second and walk through her thoughts and her intentions and justify everything she did or didn't do. And it's a very, very strenuous thing. So people like Polite will say, well, the prosecutor's like, we don't want to put this child on the stand and make her relive this trauma. And because she's a child who's been traumatized, and the way the trauma works in the brain, she can get tripped up by the defense attorney. She can be confused or turned around. And so to avoid that trauma of the child, I'll take your severe charge and knock it down a peg or two. And then he takes that negotiated charge and pretend like that's what he actually did. So my dude that was trying to break into a pawn shop was like, oh, I was just vandalizing. You think he was just tagging his name on the wall. And so a man that raped a child can walk around and say, oh, I was just irresponsible, had some unjustified contact with the minor or something that's obscure in the law books. And make you think, oh, he just, got a little tipsy and did a little something, but it wasn't that bad. So anyway, that's the thing that Polite did after he was convicted, that his lawyer negotiated down his charges in order to protect his victim from being re-traumatized. And he's trying to sell that as, I didn't do what they said I did. And I can let me tell my own story. I'm telling other people's business. If you remember this, at UMKC, I got into a fight at UMKC, and they came in and arrested us on the grounds of the campus. And we could have been charged with assault or disorderly conduct. And basically, we got a ticket for trespassing. And they were like, listen, we give you, and I got a ticket for trespassing and had to pay a fine for trespassing. When actually what I had gotten into, even though I was a victim my damn self, it's really hard for black men to be victims, for people to understand that we can and are often victims. Uh, but anyway, I could have been charged with a myriad of higher crimes, not really anything approaching a felony, but me and my friends got into fight with these other guys on the basketball court. And not to say that anybody ever said this, but potentially you could imagine we were all black. Me and my 3 friends were black, and the 5 guys we got into it were all white. So they could have even been like, oh, this is a potential hate crime or whatever. But I could walk around and says, well, I got a trespassing charge when I was in my early 20s. I got a trespassing charge, when in reality, I'm out here fighting and trying to stomp people out. So be careful when you meet people and they say, well, I got charged with this, or I got, especially people like Diddy, people with resources. They have these lawyers that are able to get their charges greatly reduced from, and what they plead to is not anywhere near what they did. And this is not an endorsement of or a condemnation of pleading down, because I support, in principle, pleading down crimes and reducing sentences. I am more about restorative justice. I don't think incarcerating and punishing. I am for correcting. It's supposed to be the Department of Corrections, not the Department of Punishment. So I'm not condemning that, but I'm saying we who are in the community, when we encounter certain people that have certain charges, But anyway, I think I spend way too much time on that. What I want to talk about Diddy on that World is Filled. I read that. I showed it to my wife, and she was like, oh, I knew Diddy was trash. And then I thought that song, The World is Filled with Pimps and Hoes. And what she described, what Aaron Hall, I said it was the 3rd victim, but I'm not sure of the chronology. But what she described Aaron Hall and Diddy did to her in that song, The World is Filled, he literally described in terms of passing women around. I won't be satisfied till all my niggas hit it. Like he said in that song, we date them like we hate them, and we treat them like we don't need them. So it was just surprising to me that a victim would come forward and articulate what was done to them, and for that the accusee to have literally bragged about doing this, not just to the victim, but saying, this is how I operate, this is how I do. And then it made me think about the pimp era. Snoop Dogg, the early 90s, I think, when PIMP, I'm a pimp. Now it goes a little bit before that. But when the pimp era of hip hop, where rappers were literally wearing perms and long glazed fingernails and carrying pimp cups and pimp stick and tricked out Cadillac brohams, and the pimp era like really took precedent. And it is parallel to the rise of West Coast and Deep South. And before, in hip hop, the pimp trope was kind of like a gimmick. If you remember Too Short, Born to Mac, and the Freaky Tales, and I remember hearing that, and we really thought it was comedy in our minds. I'm thinking nobody lived like that. Nobody's doing that kind of shit. So he's just telling all these crazy stories about, all his freaky tales, and don't fight the feeling. And I'm, as a kid, because I'm listening to this as a young child, as an adolescent, I started hearing that. But then, like, everybody was a pimp. The gangsters wanted to be pimps, and PIMP I don't know what you heard about me. Snoop Dogg is literally bringing pimps out on tour and bringing pimps on Good Morning America and pimps up in the documentaries and all this pimp shit. I never really was a fan of none of the pimp rappers, except maybe Ice-T. But then Ice-T, but when that whole avalanche of pimp, and I had a bookstore, and people would be coming in there, and they all want Iceberg Slim books and all that, player books. Tariq Nasheed at the time had some how to manipulate women books. And just a couple of years ago, this whole understanding of sex trafficking came out. And the same people who for the last 20 to 30 years have been consuming and boosting and embracing and celebrating pimping and pimp culture, and you want to pimp my ride, and I'm a pimp this job, I'm a pimp, everything is, and the pimp is the coldest image we could come up with. Civilians, as the people in the street call us, squares and lames, and civilians here trying to get pimp aesthetic, just regular 9-to-5 people, mailmen showing up at the club with a diamond encrusted pimp cups. Everybody started talking about trafficking, sex trafficking. And I'm like, it's real funny that y'all can make either real, and I don't know if it's real or not, but Snoop Dogg would show up to award shows with women on chains, or even and showing up with Bishop Don Magic Wand, even Farrakhan's hanging out with these characters. And then we all pretend like we give a damn about trafficking. And we all up in arms about trafficking. And I go through the hood and I see these signs up about trafficking and bring our girls home. That's weird as hell. That's just menticidal to me. So even Puffy out here, I pimp so hard, a nigga drag his mink on the flow, with this same pimp rhetoric. And at the same time, we're celebrating this shit. And then soon as, and like I always say, everybody loves Christianity until some Christian shit happens. Everybody loves capitalism until some capitalist shit happens. And everybody loves pimping until some pimp shit happens. Y'all play with this shit. Y'all get entertained with this shit. Some of y'all even dress up and act this shit out. But then when the real world consequences come rolling down, we all act shocked. We're all gasping. We're all just can't believe our eyes and can't believe our ears. Where women are like, he held me in custody. He forced me to do sex acts that I didn't want to do. And then he invited his friends and colleagues to come and have intercourse with me. And what did he say in that shit? We turn a bitch into a bisexual. I won't be satisfied till all my niggas hit it. First I hit it, then you hit it, then you send it back and split it. If she's flexible, fuck the nigga next to you. And we let that shit go platinum. We let that man become a billionaire off of that. But then when women are like, yeah, I was passed around, I was made things against my will, I was treated like property, and we're like, oh, I can't believe it. And we forget too, because we had a guy tell us life ain't nothing but bitches and money. I spell girl with the B. And then that same individual can come out and say, I got a plan to save my community. And we're like, yes, he's a role model again. See, y'all don't even hold people to that. Y'all don't even hold people to that. It's weird to me. So I really think we as a community really need to reassess in that arena. Don't play with it. Don't play with shit that you can't deal with or don't want to deal with in real life. Don't play gangster. Don't play pimp. Don't play that shit. Don't play street if you ain't street. I don't even know what do we gain from it. I don't get it. And we don't hold grudges. And I again, if degradation as entertainment, degradation and dehumanization sold as entertainment. And I think a lot of our taste for dehumanizing media comes because media wasn't made for black people in the US. In the US. African people, the entertainment we consumed was pretty much a byproduct of whatever white people put out there. For a long time in the United States, media and advertising didn't cater to blacks because we weren't fully human. We weren't considered. And I remember when this changed. You know, my wife's uncle, if you look up Mingo and Associates, he was one of the first black advertising executives that was able to tell Hollywood and corporate America to say, hey, if you make shit specifically targeting black people, you can generate quite a bit of revenue. And everybody started selling that whole thing, how to sell to the Negro and showing all that. And they kind of realized, oh, we can go ahead and get they crumbs. But even when they came up with how to sell to the Negro and marketing targeted blacks, they understood the mother lode, where the money resides, is still with the white majority. So even black media, we look at media and think it's black. We look at a movie and say this is a black movie, and we listen to music and say this is black music, and we run around saying for the culture about everything and anything without even defining what the culture is before you. And what we're really consuming is white media. The media that speaks to the sentiments, the desires, the vision, the goals, the values, the worldview, the theories and philosophies of white people. But because they put a baseline in it, or because they put a colored actor or a white actor in blackface, we think that's for us. That's us. And one thing that is consistent across the Western world, across the imperialist colonizer world, is whenever white people come into conquest, they make media that is degrading and dehumanizing to their victims. And this ain't just with TV. You can go back to the Greeks and the Romans. The whole concept of barbarism and a barbarian was literally the Romans making fun of the people they were conquering. And they said their language sounded funny, bar. And they would have Greek and Roman slaves dress up like the barbarians in the arenas and do degrading things. And call the people they were killing savages. Call the people they were eating cannibals. Call the people they were robbing thieves. Call the people they were raping rapists. They've been doing that since their first earliest civilization, projecting what they do and who they are onto their victims. And they make and it ain't just a black thing. They don't do it because we're black. They do it because they're white. Look at British media and how Irish people were portrayed in British literature, were portrayed in British art during European colonize of the Emerald Isles of Ireland. And I swear to you, the terms in terms of being lazy, in terms of being unable to control their sexual drives, and rapists and cunning and prone to drink and alcoholism, broken homes, everything you would know. You would not know if I wrote down a list of views and terms that the British had for the Irish. You would not know that I was talking about another white person, because they don't even change it up. They're not a very creative people in that. You just think as long as they've been doing racism, they recycle and rehash a lot of their racist tropes. A lot of their racist tropes. You know, same thing that the Israelis, the Zionists are saying about The Palestinians, same thing the U.S. was saying about the Afghanis. Same thing they said about the Yemenis, the Syrians, the Iraqis. They just rehash this shit, and we act like it's brand new every time they bring this old shit out. Atrocity hopping. But anyway, I'm saying all that to say, when you see a black man get up and talk about these bitches and hoes, pimping hoes, we don't love these hoes, that's not a black man speaking from a black mind. That's white. That's white culture. That's white history. That is documented white value system and principles. That is white theology. A woman is a wretched thing. A woman brought sin into the world. A woman is not the life giver. A man, a male God, breathed life, took mud and breathed life into a male specimen. And then the first giver of life is a man, not even from his reproductive organs, but from his rib. And he made him a helpmeet, a supporting character. In it's his world, the stage, he's the lead character, the supporting character of Eve, and then the Eve corrupted and cursed Adam. That goes all the way back. And so black men came and said, well, I want to make some money. And to make money, I got to cross over. And to cross over, I got to say and do shit. And white folks have a perception of black people, a mythology of black people. And if you are a black person that can package that mythology and serve it to them, that's crossing over. That's crossing over. And we got black artists that come to us publicly and complain that they failed to cross over. Complain about not getting Grammys. So anyway, I think we need to redefine what black art is, what our artists, our performers are, because a lot of if it's not enough for it to be a black artist, it's not enough for them to use African instruments or African rhythms or African creativity. If the psychological, emotional, ideological component of whatever art is being in front of us, we need to say, where does that come from? Gangsta is not a European, is a European concept. Gangsta is not an African concept. I don't care what gang you name. Their origins, the way gangs are structured, and the goals and objectives and values and structures of gangs come straight out of Europe. Come straight out of Europe. You know, that's just what it was. Now, Africans did have organizations of young men, adolescent young men who were coming into manhood that would band together. But they didn't band together to prey on other people. They didn't band together to be hired out as mercenaries to kill. That came. That did come. But these societies, these communities, these groupings took gangs. I don't care if every member of that gang is black. I don't care if black is in the name of the gang. You're engaged in European Western behavior. European Western behavior. But I digress. We way over there. Let's come back over here. Time is pretty good. All right, how y'all doing? Kind of cold up here. This room is full of windows. Anyway, I think that we have to look at our own culpability when billionaire predators, famous rapists, and famous predators who have enjoyed nothing but love. And I'm not even just talking about sexual predators, economic predators, cultural predators. I think we have to look at our own culpability. Why are we so fucking entertained by somebody standing in front of us, PIMP, And it didn't start. I believe you me. I'm not talking about the young artists, because before we got 30 years of hip hop before we can get to any of these face tattoo rappers. Before we can get to any of these emo screaming non-rapping rappers, non-rhyming rappers of today. Anybody with a little in their name. We got 30 years of anti-African propaganda that we haven't accounted for. Even before, I don't know what you heard about me. PIMP. Even before that, going all the way back. You know, going all the way back. Anti-African music, dehumanizing music, sexist, misogynist music. We have to ask ourselves, why does it entertain us? I mean, Eazy-E's like straight out of Compton. Is a brother that'll smother your mother and make your sister think I love her. This dude said he'll smother my mother, and I'm like, what? Whoa. Time to reassess. Time to reel it back in. It's time to sit down and reevaluate, I think. And I'm not talking from, because I know it's just when we get old, because swear for God, I do my research. So I ain't listening to no old heads. I'm talking about the music from my generation. I can't even, every time some brother gonna post a picture of some young artist doing some backwards ass shit, I gotta go pull up the artists from our era that did the backwards shit and say, well, what did you do with that? You know, everybody's like, oh, how bad hip hop was now. In fact, in some areas, hip hop has gotten better. You know, I don't think that any artist today could could rap about the shit like Bushwick Bill, where he counted in detail, where he was a peeping Tom and he broke into a woman's house and raped and murdered her, and then was sitting next to her, dead body on the couch. And I think it's time for me to make a decision. Should I live in reality or live in the television? Go listen to Gripping on that other level. And I swear to you, I follow Willie D on Instagram and look at some of his YouTube commentaries. Willie D's out here condemning young rappers. And a couple of times I've had to type to Willie D some of his own lyrics. You remind me of that monkey looking bitch, Grace Jones. Calling black women monkeys? I don't think that shit would fly today. You know, and we know the homophobia wouldn't fly, but I count that as an improvement. So there are certain things, certain types of lyrics that have been cleaned up from my generation. Certain improvements made on the content of rap that would not be allowed to fly today. If Rick Ross had made that song about putting something in a woman's drink and take her home and take advantage of her, if he had said that shit in 95, 96, if he said that in the Death Row era, NWA era, in the that Fifth Ward takeover, Rap-A-Lot era, nobody would have blinked. So it ain't all bad. There are some areas where the youth have improved and cleaned up some of the filth we've spewed, and there's other areas where they've gone even deeper, like drugs. I think the content on drugs is much worse, you know, because the crackhead artist used to lie. The artists used to out each other. Remember when Cannabis said, you try to front like you a drug-free role model, you disgust me. I know niggas that seen you smoke weed recently. Rappers used to lie about not smoking weed. I mean, before he came out with The Chronic, Dr. Dre was like, I want to express that I don't smoke weed or cess, because that'll give a brother brain damage. So rappers were even lying about that they didn't smoke weed, let alone doing the harder drugs, even though they were all doing the harder drugs. They were hiding crack, anti-crack albums, like, you know, I'm gonna tell you like this, and I know for a fact I'm gonna live a long time, and I don't smoke crack. And the whole dressing room is full of crack, all in the couch cushions. But it's all good. So the drug, glamorizing drug abuse. So we did away with the homophobia, murder, and the predatory attacks on women, only to flip back to let's all get high instead of murdering, and preying upon women and gay people. Let's just all OD and murder each other instead. It's curious, but anyway, I do think that we need to curate our culture. I think African culture, especially African culture of the diaspora, because African culture on the continent is a little more resilient. They have, even though histories of colonization, forced labor, atrocities, they still are home. They are in our motherland, and they do have certain level of consistency and a certain unbroken continuum that we lost. So we of the African diaspora, of the Americas, the Caribbean, Africans outside, in recent migrants, that whose parents or grandparents went to foreign, and I think we need to start consciously, not just cultivating and curating our culture. We need to consciously make it radical and revolutionary. And with that said, I'll move on to the topic of today, which is kind of on that. And today's topic is entrepreneurialism and the panacea myth. And I'm not even targeting entrepreneurialism specifically. I mean, Geechee's really good at talking about the stats, and Geechee and Jared Ball are really good about telling on you Black entrepreneurs about how the Black elite are not that elite. Hell, they ain't that Black either. But here's my position as a person who's had tremendous failures in entrepreneurialism and some modest success in entrepreneurialism. My main problem with Black businesses and Black entrepreneurialism is the misrepresentation. I think Black business owners and the Black business arena and the Black entrepreneurial arena, I think they misrepresent not just what it is, they misrepresent not only what they mean to our community now, currently, they misrepresent the potential that they have in the future. Again, I'm not going to beat you over the head. Go read Dr. Jared Ball's book, The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. Go check out Geechee, where he talks about how the vast majority of Black businesses are worker-owned, where they don't even have employees. Their revenues don't even make the chart. Revenues are less than 1% of the major companies. Many of them are dependent on grants and government contracts. It's just the bottom line is Black people, business are not succeeding at business as a collective, and Black people are not going to get power or liberation through business. But that's nothing to be ashamed of, because guess what? Nor did white people, nor did anyone. Nobody became to power or liberation through entrepreneurialism. There wouldn't be so much propaganda around entrepreneurialism if entrepreneurialism was a viable means to secure societal or social power or liberation. And the thing that's most tragic about this current entrepreneurial push, because I'm hearing it everywhere, everybody's a goddamn entrepreneur. Everybody is either currently a successful entrepreneur, got a big plan to one day be a successful entrepreneur, or they are on the downslope, ready to cash out from being successful entrepreneurs. And this did not occur with social media. The whole black business, buy black. And let me tell you something about buy black. Buy black, and I said it before, nothing new here. Buy black is not a revolution or liberation strategy. Buy black is a marketing scheme. It's a marketing scheme. Just like woman-owned business or gay-owned business, it's a marketing scheme. It's a way to appeal to a certain segment of the consumer market. That's all it is. There are black business owners that in certain parts of town, they are like, I'm not gonna say no name, but an enterprising black entrepreneur. I went to school with him. And it ain't his father started this business, and he and his brother basically inherited the business. And it was an auto detail shop. And in certain parts of towns, his promotions would be black owned, premier black owned business, blackety black symbols, black images in one part of town. And for the exact same businesses, and I think they had 2 locations, maybe 3. I'll say he had 3 just to big him up, but I believe it was 2. And then you go to the other part of town, you go to the white part of town, and the only thing that was on the promotion was promoting the services. We have the best prices, our services, we have special techniques and technicians on staff, and when we have guarantee, and he would only promote the competitive pricing, and he would promote the services offered. In the other part of town, and the other flyers, he wouldn't even talk about the competitive pricing and wouldn't talk about, even go into detail about the services. He would say, we're black owned. And we're one of only 2 black owned auto detailing in the metropolitan era. Whoop, whoop, whoop. It was a marketing scheme. It was a marketing scheme. And this individual had no intention, number one, had no intention, and number 2, felt no obligation to prioritize hiring black people, to prioritize educating black people, to prioritize advancing policies in the community or contributing to anything related to black folks. Black people should support me for existing and being black, and I owe them nothing in return. And I guarantee that I will give same and equal service to a Klansman than I would to any black man. It don't call it. Y'all money is green. I don't even harm. I don't even have animosity or any issue with the buy black, black first, black business marketing scheme. Again, my problem is if we say buying black has in the past or will in the future have any appreciable impact on the conditions and issues pertinent to African people of the diaspora on the continent. Me personally, what would stand out more and allow me to value patronizing a business more is if it's ecological, carbon neutral or carbon negative, or vegan, plant-based, or sustainable practices, or cooperative ownership model. All of those things I just listed come before black for me. If black is along with those things, I'll dance in the street. I'll do the Holy Ghost chicken dance in the street. So I'm not saying black is a negative or black owned is a negative. Owned for the vast majority of your engagement with the commercial empires is all but irrelevant. And I remember one thing that was funny to me that kind of really drove this home for me. Again, I'm going back in the day. I had a homeboy who wore nothing, and I promise and I swear to you, he wore nothing but cross colors and later FUBU. And he would have some like Walker wear. He wore Walker wear, cross colors, and FUBU. This is a little bit before FUBU, but when FUBU hit, and Carl Kanai. And he wore Carl Kanai. And it's relevant because he was in music. He would make music, he would promote music, he would promote shows. I've known this guy, our mothers were good friends. I've known this guy, grew up with this guy. And he'd be head to toe, because aside from like his car and his houses, I mean, I think he spent more money on his clothing than anything. And this brother would be beaming with pride, a positive dude, a good dude. I think he's in the Bronx now. I ain't talking. I got to reach out to my man. But this is back in KC. We go out, we go to the club, whether it was an event he was promoting or he's just going out for leisure or he's on a date. This dude is cross color. Carl Kanai, later FUBU, like, yeah, this is black. I'm doing something for my people. And I had seen an article, I think it was in the Source magazine. And the Source magazine was basically a takedown of cross colors. Because if you remember the old cross color advertisement, it was all black. Like, yeah, we doing it for ourselves. Same thing. Remember, FUBU stood for us, by us. And I remember the launch of FUBU. I went to the launch party of FUBU. I didn't even go there. I just went to see LL Cool J because I thought he was going to be rapping. And dude didn't even rap. Not one rhyming word. Not cat, bad hat. LL Cool J didn't do nothing. Never forgive Ralph McDaniels from that. But anyway, Ralph McDaniels had a hip-hop clothing store. And I was watching Video Music Box. Shout out to Crazy Sam, too. And I was looking, and they were like, for us, by us. They never said the word FUBU. They were like, this is for us, by us. It's for us. This is for us, by us. Woo, woo, woo. And it wasn't too far from where I lived. And it was right next door to the place where I used to get my veggie and my gluten patties. So I'm like, I'm going to be there. So that Saturday was the for us, by us, not the FUBU launch parties. And I went up in there, and LL Cool J was standing up there on the platform, on the DJ platform, and the music was going, and they was giving out free T-shirts and all this. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. Didn't really like the look. It was kind of cartoonish, you know. And you know, this was my freshman year in college, so I was trying to look preppy because I knew I had made it. I made it out the hood like Dwayne Wayne said I could. I was in a different world, so I was wearing, you know, polo shirts and khakis, not the polo low life stuff, but just wearing those type of shirts, collared shirts and khakis. For about 2-3 months until I started running the streets of New York. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. All I'm saying is it was for us, by us. And anyway, I found this article. I think it was in the Source magazine, or it could have been Vibe, one of them old ass hip hop magazine rags. And it was an article about the structure of cross colors. And people were staffing at Cross Colors, and they were in it was just a takedown article. Anyway, there was this one article where they were like, the co-founders of Cross Colors would get their money and go out and buy luxury cars from Italians. They buy drugs from Colombians just to drive around blue-eyed, blonde-haired white women around Los Angeles. You know. And that's how journalism, that was hip hop journalism back in the day. They pulled no punches. Y'all think I was bad? Go get some 93, 91 Source magazine, you know, Vibe magazine, Yo, Word Up magazine. Go read those articles, man. They pulled no punches back in that day. You know, and hip hoppers and rappers weren't really celebrities then, so people weren't scared to tell what they knew about them. But anyway, or moguls. I don't think we had our first mogul at that time. It's Russell Simmons. But wasn't nobody scared of him. Anyway, I showed him the article because he really in his mind was like, listen, every time I overpriced hoodie, every time, and again, remember, this is 89, 90, 91, 92. I go buy this $120 hoodie. I'm doing something for my people. I'm advancing my people. I'm putting something in the people pot. I'm putting in collective wealth and collective black wealth, the bowl of that is collective black wealth. I'm putting something on it. I'm putting a down payment on freedom. And I mean, this dude would be putting out. And then later, Fat Farm. Y'all remember Fat Farm? I had a homeboy spend his whole check on Fat Farm. And it was just a regular sweatshirt, a gray, not even a hoodie, just a regular sweatshirt. And it had that little Fat Farm cow thing here. And I went to my man. I was like, my man, Rich, damn, look at that. That shit is fly dog. Damn. Look at that shit. And he's like, oh, it ain't nothing, yo. You know, shit, it ain't nothing, yo. It ain't nothing. And so then I saw him. That was like on a Tuesday. I saw my man on a Friday. We was about to go to the village and shit. And I say, Rich, where's that platform? He was like, man, fuck Fat Farm. He was like, fuck Fat Farm. Fuck Russell Simmons, man. Fuck that shit. I'll never forget that shit. I guess you had to be there. That shit was funny as hell. Because when that realization, when that high, when those endorphins, you know, y'all know the brain chemicals now. We didn't have the words back then. But whenever those endorphins from that purchase wore off and then his pockets was empty and he had to go to his mama or his daddy and ask for lunch money and he's in college, you know. And back then when we were sophomore and freshman in college, we'd rather go hungry than ask one of our elders for money for food when we did something stupid, because they always run it down. Look at your shoes. Look at you. They're going to look you up and down and make sure you better come in rags. You better come in there looking like Oliver Twist. When I was a kid, if you're going to ask, if you're in college and they paying that and buying books, and then you go ask your aunties and cousins and uncles and them for $1, you better walk in there looking like Oliver Twist. You better not walk in there with no Fat Farm shit on, talking about I don't have money. My lunch card ran out or some shit. But anyway, back then, way back in the early 90s, I figured out the whole buy black thing was a scam, a hustle. And most of the black people, let me tell you what many of these black people who secure the bag, and I'm not talking about your local business owner. Because your local business owner is just that. It ain't nothing. I remember I grew up buying black. Or y'all remember Mama Dale's, Kansas City, Missouri, the Project convenience store? And they would come with 7-Eleven and all these fly-by-night quick trip. But Mama Dale's is probably still there. Next time I'm in Kansas City, I'm going to drive through. It was a little neighborhood. And it wasn't even a store. It wasn't even a commercial store. It was a house. And somebody turned the sliding door on the side of a house into a commercial entryway. They turned a home and they dug out the driveway, expanded the driveway across the yard, and they had a parking lot. And first they had a regular refrigerator in there, and then they put a commercial front opening refrigerator in there, and they put racks, and they turned that little rinky-dink house into a full-scale miniature grocery store in the middle of the hood. And it was a black-owned family, and they would take that money and that they would make from their business, pay the restock, pay their bills, and take care of their family. I'm talking about people like Jay-Z that's black. When they get the money, they got investment capital, they got disposable capital, they got private jet money. You know, fucking flexing on us. Goddamn celebrities we made rich, flexing on us with the goddamn Hope Diamond and shit. When they get that money, when we support those black businesses, those black enterprises, those black capitalists, inevitably, they begin to put their money and their resources towards subverting us. Because, again, we focus so much on making money, we never tend to think about sustaining money. We all love the rag to riches story. I love the rag to riches story. I watch movies, you know, I listen to songs. Who doesn't like the rags to riches story? It's a good story. I don't care if it's Annie or was it Pippi Longstockings. I don't care if it's a hood movie of a dude made good, the black athlete that got his whole family. We all like that story, but the reality is we focus way on too much on how the making the money. We never focus on sustaining money, because fiat currency devalues aggressively. So if I got $1 million sitting here in my lap, when I go to bed and wake up in the morning, that $1 million is worth less than it was when I went to bed. So you can't, gone are the days where you can hide money under a mattress. Because of investment capital, money depreciates relentlessly. So in order to sustain your level of production, it's not enough to sustain your money. It's not enough to keep it at $1 million. Let's say, hey, I got $1 million, but I earn enough that I can hold that million in perpetuity. You have to constantly expand it and expand it and expand it. Right? And how do you do that? Do you rap more and rap harder? Do you dunk more balls? Do you sell more candy? Or what are entrepreneurs doing nowadays? What's the hot entrepreneurial shit? The way you make money enough to sustain and to stay ahead of the depreciation of the currency is you have to invest. Everybody tells you. You hit the lottery tomorrow, everybody that cares about you is going to tell you, hey, don't just put that shit in a bank account. Don't put it under your mortgage. Go and invest your money. And we got whole black leaders from 19 Keys to Earn Your Leisure. We got gurus telling us, even good guys, pocket watching with Jay, financial advisors telling you to invest. They tell you to invest, but do they tell you what investment is? What is investment? What is the basic definition of an investment? How do investments work? If I go buy stock in Ford Motor Company, what does that mean? If I buy stock in Hewlett Packard, or even if I buy Bitcoin, what does it mean to invest? How can everybody be talking about somebody, but nobody talk about it? The bottom line of investment, the basic value or principle of investment is, the basic goal of investment is you put in as little as possible to extract as much as you can. Now, if you conducted anything in your life that way, people will say you're a piece of shit. If I sat here and told you now, I invest in my wife, you will all be like, right on, brother. I say to you, I invest in my children and I invest in my community. Everybody be like, ooh, BroDiallo, yeah, you the one, you the. And nobody will even say, what the fuck does that mean? You invest in your wife. You invest in your children. You invest in your community. Hell, let's say I'm going to invest in me. Everybody would be like, yeah, I get all this love. But investing literally means you put in as little as possible to get out maximum. Investment is about putting in as little as possible to extract the most. That's what a master investor, a good investor. If you put in $10, if you invest $10 and 5 years later you come out and say, what do you have? And I say, I have $10 here. They would say you failed. Because if you get in what you put out of something, you have to get out more than what you put in. So how does that work? How do you get more out of something than what you put in? How does that work? How do you get to it? I can sit here. I just had a brother earlier was like, I bought $1 worth of Bitcoin and that turned into $140. How? If I buy $10 worth of Ford stock or Ford shares, and then in a month it's $18. Where did that $8 come from? Now, what they tell us is, well, that comes from value added. That means Ford went out and got raw materials and they manufactured a car, and they took some of my money and put it with everybody else's money, and then they made this car. And this car, because it was once a hunk of metal, or the car was some chemicals and some ore, and they have these facilities that they invested in these facilities, so they turn a hunk of metal and some chemicals into a functioning automobile, and that added value. A hunk of metal was worth 8 cents, and I molded into a dashboard, and now it's worth $150, and I attached that to a car that's worth $36,000, and that's where the money comes from. Motherfucking dabra. But what they don't tell you is, in order to get that hunk of metal out of the ground, they had to expend so many resources. And those resources expended was the labor of the miners. Now, if I pay the miner their just amount of money for extracting that, then the car would cost more. And then there's environmental damage. So we polluted waterways, we killed off certain animal species, we disrupted an ecosystem. There are certain farmers and herdsmen who live around that area, who have cattle that have died, who have children who are sick, who will need a lifelong care from being exposed to the contaminations of the mine. None of that is factored into the price of the car. And none of that is factored into the return on your investment. Because if every auto manufacturer that makes internal combustion engines had to pay for asthma, if every tire manufacturer, because of the particulate matter in the atmosphere used by driving the car, if every manufacturer had to pay for the toxicity in the environment, had to pay to recover the ecosystems that they polluted, there would be no profit. So even your innocent profit, I don't own stock in exploitative businesses. I own stock in an automobile company. Everybody needs cars. It completely ignores the social costs, the environmental costs. Those are called externalities. So if you are an investor, your profits are a byproduct of hyper exploitation of workers and of people in society and ecosystems. That's what investment is. And how do you do that? How can you go somewhere and poison people's cattle, poison people's water, pollute people's air, contaminate people's land, kill off the fauna, and disrupt the ecosystem? How do you do that? And people just let you. Because people in the third world aren't as smart as us. They don't know how to negotiate for a fair wage. They don't know how to negotiate, and they don't know how to invest themselves. Because if you're an Amazonian native, if you're a sub-Saharan Africa, impoverished sub-Saharan African, if you're a Vietnamese or Chinese sweatshop worker, you're not as smart as these American investors. Why don't they just take their yen, their pesos, and put it in the market? So the way you're able to do that is you have to tell the people that you're doing this shit to, if you stand up, we will kill you. Or we're not going to kill you. We're America, democracy. We will assassinate your socialist leaders, assassinate your nationalist leaders, assassinate your patriotic just leaders, and put in puppet regimes. And then we will fund and train and even bring the military from your home, bring the military from Honduras, bring the policemen from Ghana, right? And bring them to the United States or to Israel or to Saudi Arabia to receive special training. And then we'll give foreign aid to your country in the form of grains and stuff so that you can develop your own internal agricultural system. But you're dependent on U.S. farmers, which is welfare for U.S. farmers. So you depend on us to feed you. And we have equipped your government to kill you. That's what investment is. And you just sitting at home and take your smartphone and go on to one of these investment apps and click. I'm gonna buy me some Netflix. I'm gonna buy me some this stock and that. So investment is parasitism. You are a parasite. I'm not condemning you if you have investments. I understand we are all trying to navigate this sick system. But please, if you are an entrepreneur, if you are an investor, if you are a black business, you are part of the problem. You are indebted to the people, the poor people of the world, the working people of the world, the people with toxins and pollutants in their bloodstream. You owe a debt to all those people. So even if you get your Gucci, Louis, Fendi, even if you got a drop top on the parking lot, even if you got your McMansion, you should at least think to yourself, everything I have that provides me any level of comfort is a byproduct of the hyper exploitation of the masses and majority of humanity. 90% of the world's people have to live on the verge of poverty or in poverty just so I can live this unstable, unsustainable lifestyle. And what are you going to do about it? How do you pay your debt to? We are worried about Equifax. We all worried about these goddamn credit agencies when we're in debt to the masses of the people of the world. But anyway, all that to say is entrepreneurs should not be people who are celebrated in our community. They shouldn't. Not saying that you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. If I got up here tomorrow and started a business tomorrow, it's nothing I feel I should be celebrated for. Investors and all of that. Because we are still navigating and operating in a parasitic, hyper-exploitative, unsustainable system. I'm not telling you not to be an entrepreneur or an investor. I'm telling you not to misrepresent what it means to be an entrepreneur and an investor. If you are an entrepreneur and you are hiring people to work for you, there's no way for you to justly and fairly compensate your workers and generate a profit. Profit is unpaid wages. Profit is, by definition, theft. It's legalized theft. That's all it is. If you come to work and generate $10 worth of value at your job, you did $10 worth of work. They can't pay you that $10 fucking dollars. They can't pay you that $10 fucking dollars. And let's say in order for you to do $10 worth of work, you have to expend $3 worth of their resources. Use their paper, use their computer, use their facilities, use their energy and input from the other workers. So let's say even if you had, okay, if I work for myself, I got to pay $7. So I really generated $7. So even if the company says, well, we have to take from you as the worker, in order for you to generate this $10, we have to set up the business apparatus and the structures for you to do the work in. We have to provide you the equipment or provide you the materials or provide you the facilities. So that would be $3 out of every $10 that you make. But then I can't stop there, because then you got to pay the government, because the government has the roads, the government has the police. Theoretically, this is what they claim, to stop the cops from to stop the thugs and the criminals from kicking in the door and just taking everything. So that's another $2. So that's $5. So you did $10 worth of work, $5 to allow you to create the infrastructure, and $5 and another $2 for the larger infrastructure of society. And so, okay, give me my $5. No, wait. Then there's the shareholders. There's the investors. Then they come in, right? You didn't pay $3 to sustain your work, $2 to sustain the larger society. You got $5. And people who have done nothing, people who inherited a stock. You can work in a hospital, and people who have never wouldn't know a hypodermic needle from a knitting needle. People who have never seen the blood and guts and vomit. People who've never done nothing. People who are sitting in the French Riviera. People who are sitting in a villa in Saudi Arabia. People on private jets heading to one of their 6 private estates. Those people say, got to get my cut too, because I put in the money that I didn't earn. I have this just random piece of paper, and they take $4. So you do $10 worth of work, you take home $1. And that dollar not just is about wages. They don't pay you for, because I think if you're a wage laborer, they should pay you from the moment you wake up at home. So people that live further from the job should get paid more. And all these white folks, these gentrifiers who live in the inner city now that are commuting to work while they trick black people to run out to the suburbs and driving 2 or 3 hours from work. And I know, because I know people. When I lived in New York, I know a cat that lived in Brooklyn, and he worked in Lower Manhattan. And he would get on, go 4 train stops, and right there walk upstairs into his business. But then he's like, I worked hard, and me and my wife and my kids, and they moved up to Bronzeville, which is upstate New York, a northern suburb. Really nice house. He even got a circular driveway. Now the dude takes him almost 4 hours to get to work, while the yuppie white kids whom he trained to do his job are now getting up and walking up. It's a trick. Gentrification is a trick. But anyway, that's what entrepreneurs do also. So we shouldn't be celebrating entrepreneurs. If anything, entrepreneurs should be celebrating us. They should be celebrating the workers, the working class. They should be looking up and valuing and asking us, what can we do for you? But we got it all twisted. But here's the trick. Entrepreneurialism is just a new panacea. Let me tell you what a panacea is. A panacea is basically a cure-all. A panacea is something that is projected as a solution for all your problems. That's what panacea means. Something that is seen as a solution to everything. And since slavery, Black people have been embracing panaceas. We kind of laser focus or zero in on a phenomenon or a practice or an action that will speak to everything. We misinterpret the source of our oppression. I just saw this video that's been going around talking about gangbangers are the new KKK, or gangbangers are the real ones committing genocide. So Black criminals and Black gangs are committing genocide. And people have been sending this to me because I've been condemning gangsterism. I've been talking about gangsterism for a long time. And I've been, just like I was calling out this pimp shit, saying we shouldn't, right? And I got that book review on my channel. Like, share, subscribe to my channel, all that business, that talks about Black on Black crime, Black self-annihilation in service to white supremacy. So this guy's sitting here slouching in the chair talking about how the gangbangers are the problem. And that is a symptom. Gangbangers are not committing genocide against Black people. Black gangs are a byproduct of genocide, not the cause of genocide. If every Black person in America was lawful, unaffiliated, proper English, pants pulled up around their waist, that would not take any step to reduce the intensity and intention of genocide by the white majority against the African minorities within the United States. They were committing genocide and oppressing and committing horrendous violence against us before the first gangbanger in the Black gang was ever conceptualized or conceived of or born. And so this guy is talking about that. And so I go and say, no, Black gangs are a symptom of oppression, not the source or the cause of oppression. They are a byproduct of genocidal oppression, not the cause of genocidal oppression. And so I have to explain that because people confuse my condemnation of gangs with this idiot's Uncle Tom race trader's condemnation of gangs. But we'd like to deflect and misdirect the source of our oppression, because as dangerous as Black gangs are, as bloodthirsty as they are, it's much easier to condemn Black gangs and Black gangsterism than it is white gangs and white gangsterism. Because white gangs don't do drive-bys, they do carpet bombing. So they're much more deadly. But we see white gangsterism as lawful, as normal, as even necessary and beneficial. So we don't even define white gangsterism as gangsterism. We call it spreading democracy. We call it policies. We call it norms, international norms. So that was a problem. But let me talk about this concept of panacea, because right now, entrepreneurialism and Black business, Black investing, multi-generational wealth, this economic bullshit, this economic fantasy is the current panacea. And a panacea is basically a cure-all. A panacea is the generally false belief that this particular thing will solve all of the problems facing a group or an individual. I actually looked up the etymology of this word because I've been using it. I had a friend who was in getting her doctorate in pharmacology, and I bought her a present, a graduation present. And it was a book called Prozac, Pandora or Panacea. But All right. So the root of the word really literally means all remedy. Pan, like pantheon, means all gods. Pan-African means all Africans. So panacea, which is from the root word akos, and I'm looking this shit up. I ain't no linguist. I just pulled the shit up, but I looked it up before even. So akios, or the suffix of asia or sia, which was previously akios. It was pan-akios or panakis, but the English version it means all remedy. All remedy. It means pan, all cures. Panacea means a cure for everything. And so what we have done under oppression, and I understand this because let me tell you something. Europeans are engaged in unrelenting total warfare. And I still think, even though Africans have been victims of total war, we yet to really grasp or understand total warfare. Africans believe that under white hegemony and capitalism, there is peace. We believe that there is sometimes war and sometimes peace. We believe that sometimes there's war in one region and there's peace in another region. So Africans was like, well, there's a war there and there's peace here. And then there's a world war where everybody's at war. And then there's an armistice and then a negotiation and a treaty. And then the war is over. Europeans are in perpetual state of warfare. They are preparing for war, executing war. They engage in warfare on all fronts. And they tell us this. We just don't believe them. And we don't fucking listen to them. I always get this wrong. I think, was it Oprah Winfrey? Y'all always tell me, no, it was Maya Angelou. But I don't know who said it. I'm not a big fan of Oprah, and I'm not the biggest fan of Maya Angelou. But one of them sisters said, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. And I see a lot of people repeating that, but I don't see people. So Europeans, even right there, they literally have a whole genre of books where I have a few of them where they have Pentagon generals, and they go and hire these generals in Pentagon to teach people how to do business. They teach you how to study. Everything they do is a war on drugs, war on poverty. The only way they can engage any issue. We're going to have a war on diabetes, a war on obesity. Okay, it was Maya. I'll lock that in. And we look at the people who are in a perpetual state of war. They define themselves at war with nature. And they have to do conquest of everything. And we really believe that we can, in some ways, either negotiate peace or develop peace with these people in charge of the world. Right? And so Black people, we've been under perpetual attack, but we haven't always comprehended the attack because we understand when somebody's doing physical violence to us. I think that we are growing. There's been a lot of research and writing, even as people are now starting to define racism as a public health issue. But racism is an act of war. It is war. And they tell you all the time, they don't just have guns. Every single military base has a library. They engage in warfare and academic warfare. We had our revolutionary scholars. Dr. Carruthers literally wrote the book on intellectual warfare. Dale Jones wrote the book on cultural warfare. We got books on medical apartheid, medical warfare. Everything is weaponized. I say all the time, or as Dale Jones says, when Europeans encounter everything, they ask two questions. How can I kill it? And how can I have sex with it? And I don't just mean living things. I mean inanimate things, robots, the internet. How do I use the internet? Wireless technology to kill. And how do I use it? For sex. And everybody from Freud to Aristotle talked about the death urge, pathos and eros. They've been telling us about this, and we've had scholars, Marimba Ani, and not just white scholars, but European writers and scholars and social scientists. They've been telling us this shit. The European death urge, end game, Derek Jensen. I mean, it's just too much. As I'm thinking, it's just bombarding me. The truth has been told to us, and we either refuse to see it or act like we don't see it, because we can't accept that we have a culture whose ultimate trajectory is the destruction of all the conquest, rape, and destruction of all ecosystems and all complex life forms. And we sometimes get hung up, oh, it's racism. They don't like us because we black. The polar bear is white. Why is the polar bear going extinct? The great white shark is white. Why are they polluting the ocean and killing off the goddamn great white sharks? If you think this is just because they got some type of hang up about our black skin. Even Europeans, they literally, white folks, white children have extinction rebellion. We're not fighting against capitalism. We're not fighting against imperialism. We're not fighting against patriarchy anymore. We're fighting against extinction. And these people have the resources to reverse and stop all of this shit. They're not doing it because they have to. They're doing it because they want to. They need to. And it's a difference between doing something because you have to do it and doing something because you need to do it. You can negotiate with one person. The other one, you can't. There's no negotiation. It's an impulse. It's a drive. Everywhere they go, desertification and extinction. I was just reading an article about the elephants of Europe, the lions of Europe, the tigers of Europe. Everything is dead and gone. And now they're driving the Asian tigers, Western imperialism, Asian tigers, and African elephants. But anyway, what am I talking about? Panacea. Black people, we have a strong drive for panacea because African people, I don't know if I'm bragging, we just don't seem to have the stomach or the mentality or a culture that can engage in perpetual warfare. In perpetual warfare. The Jews are using their so-called Holocaust to exterminate a whole nother people. We've been through 10 times worse Holocaust that's expanded for a longer period of time with a larger body count. And instead of saying, well, we're going to fight against these people, we worship their gods and adopt their culture and start trying to figure out ways to blame each other for what other people did to us, saying gangsters are the reason we are where we are. Gangbangers, bottom-feeding capitalists, bottom-feeding black capitalists. But let me tell you about this panacea. What we tend to do, we come out of slavery and we don't say, well, these people just built a whole economy and nation around our forced labor. Let's destroy the motherfucker. Burn it the fuck down and go home. What did we say? Literacy. That was a panacea. There was a time where if we could just get literate. And there were articles written by prominent Negroes saying, black people, we need to become literate. We need to learn proper social graces. We need to tell the difference from a teaspoon and a soup spoon and a dinner knife and a salad fork versus a meat fork. If we could become cultured. And there were all these groups and associations of Negroes, former slaves, teaching African people how to be genteel, how to mimic the savage, the rapist, the pedophile, the predator, the enslaver, the colonizer, the genocider. And to this day, you have Africans in parts of the world wearing powdered wigs and high starch collars. You have Africans in Francophone countries who have more stringent rules on how to properly speak French than any white European French linguist. So the panacea was to demonstrate to the people who just spent centuries saying we are cattle. The panacea was we have to demonstrate our humanity, prove our humanity. And you see Negroes of the time, you look at the old paintings and sketches and you see the proper Negroid, the colored man looking with such high dignity. And to this day, we got black people up here getting those old images, that panacea, that post-slavery panacea, and showing it towards today. And they get a picture of a Negro in a suit with high-waisted pants and a starched shirt and a tweed or wool sport coat and a proper hat. And they put that image of that Negro from Jim Crow. That Jim Crow Negro, who was probably the image was taken of him less than 24 hours before he was lynched. And then they get an image of a young black man today with his pants sagging. And they were like, look how far we have failed. So demonstrating our humanity to our enemies, that was a panacea, showing that we could integrate into high society, that we could be as articulate and as cultured and sit with our pinky up. And when we show them that, and they would write articles in black newspaper. They would write articles in black newspaper telling the Southern broke iron Negroes that when they come up north to Harlem, when they come up to Chicago, when they come to DC, don't be wearing your unmentionables. Don't hang your underwear out on the line. Don't wear your work boots to church. Don't wear overalls to the grocery store. You put on a coat and a hat, and when a lady comes, you tip your hat, telling Negroes proper behavior. And then Europeans will say, wow, look at these cultured Negroes. They listen to classical music. They speak multiple languages. They have, they're in fraternities and sororities. Let's stop oppressing and killing them. And then that was a panacea. The first panacea was literacy. So were we saying the Negro should learn to read? Not Carter G. Woodson. Lord, not Carter G. Woodson. Shout out to Carter G. Woodson. He actually called this bullshit out. Shout out to E. Franklin Frazier. Even back then, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, we had people calling the bullshit out. Just like we got people like Dr. Ball today calling out the entrepreneurial panacea, we had people calling out the high culture and lettered Negro panacea. Black bourgeoisie, miseducation of a Negro. So we've always called out the panaceas. If the Negro could just get lettered, if the Negro could just get cultured, if the Negro could just appreciate the finer things in society, if the Negro could just stop shooting dice and carrying switchblade. And selling us something that if every Negro did it, if every one of y'all started a business tomorrow, if every black man, woman, and child labor started a business tomorrow, how would that change the hierarchy? How would that challenge? How would that stop the destruction of our ecosystems? How would that change our level of power and strength and influence in relationship to our oppressors? How? I know it would make us more consumers. It'll make us more aggressively participate in consumerism. But beyond consuming more shit. And most of the entrepreneurs, see, there are African people throughout the world who are working from severe deficits, that some extra money, some extra resources would fundamentally transform their life, would extend their life expectancy. But most of the baller people, they already have more than they need for essential needs. So there was another time, there are some people that say, black people, we need to arm ourselves. We need to get guns, and we got gun clubs and Not Fucking Around Coalition, Huey P. Newton Gun Club, and we got black people out here promoting gun and black people getting certified concealed carry and gun instructors, and black people proudly going on social media to show themselves at the range, talking about how they stay ready. Guns are another panacea, right? Will it extend the life of our people? Will it make our community so secure? Will it reduce the violence of the community? It might allow a person who has a lot to keep a little more. So you have people that focus in on guns, black business, and black entrepreneurialism. There was a time which is greatly reduced, and mainly because of anti-intellectualism, higher education. When I was talking about Carter G. Woodson, I actually was talking about the first panacea, a peddler. The first panacea peddler was George Washington. Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington. Cast down your pail. Industrialism. And I ain't even saying industrialism. Get a trade. That panacea comes and goes from time to time. Go and get a trade. Prove yourself in battle, black man. Enlist in the Imperial Army and get out on the front line and prove that you are brave. Prove that you have the coordination and the courage, because that's the rhetoric they used to have. Black men specifically, don't have the courage or discipline to be good soldiers. And then we went out there on the motherfucking front line and beat the shit out of every enemy American had. And then we came home to get lynched. And Barack Obama was passing out medals to dead soldiers, because during World War I and World War II, black soldiers who had earned medals weren't given the medals due to white men's insecurity and racism. And that's what you got, a posthumous medal that your great-great-grandson can put up on a wall somewhere for a war he don't even remember. So that was another panacea. So we have to get away from panacea. We have to get away from zeroing in on any specific action or resource or belief that will be a cure to all. Because, as I said, they're attacking us on all fronts. Right? So there is no economic solution to a social or psychological problem. There is no psychological or social solution to an environmental problem. There is no environmental solution to a military problem. So what we have to stop doing is rallying around entrepreneurialism, rallying around well, this is not as much anymore, but believe you me, there was a time people out here selling literacy. Even I was a big proponent of and a participant in the Black Books movement. We got to get these Black books. We got to get a copy of these particular authors in the hands of every Black youth. We have to get these books and this knowledge and wisdom and understanding in the hands of every knowledge of self. And we got to get Black people in, the spiritual panacea. Or we need to come into ourselves. Or we need to stop being so violent and be lawful panacea. Or we need to fuck the law and we need to the street and I'm hood and revolutionary but gangster. We tend to try to identify a limited number of actions or a limited particular resource. Crypto, hard currency, real estate, land, all this land panacea. And I see Black people out here telling me about it. There's a brother that bought all this land over there. There's a brother and this family bought 50 acres of this and that. And if buying land was power, I have to ask. Now, I'm not going to ask. But that's another panacea. Let me go on record saying, and this is something I really see and something I advocate for. Black people, if something gets you off, if something piques your interest, if something brings you joy, and it's not, again, Neely Fuller said, the only thing an oppressed person has an obligation to do is not compound the oppression of another oppressed person. Other than that, you can do whatever you want and not feel any type of guilt. Not feel any type of guilt. So if you want to get real estate, if you want to till land, if you want to, I would say there are some things that are inherently just immoral, like being a cop, or I think it is inherently, forget about just the non-viability of it. It's just immoral. I think crypto and currencies are bad, or just much worse. It's just unnecessary evil, intrinsically evil and unnecessary. But that's another discussion. And then you have to start getting into nuance. And Dr. Ball believes that I hate nuance. And he might be right. But anyway, let me tell you how this shit goes. When we tend to lie, because it helps us to focus. It helps us to feel useful. You know, I know one brother, reparations. Oh, that's a panacea. I know a brother who came to me and was like, listen, when I suffered a lot of injustice and hardship in my life, and when I really came up and got stable on my feet, I wanted to make sure as few Africans in this world have to go through what I went through. How do I help my people? And First, he was real estate. He started working real estate, bringing other black people into real estate. And then he was like, this is inadequate. We could do this real estate shit for the next 1,500 years and still be at a severe deficit from white folks. Because what we always ignore about black people rising, as if white people standing still waiting for us to catch them. So as black people are rising, white people are rising exponentially. So even if we secure the bag, they are the ones with the fucking bag. You know, they're the bag manufacturers. So what the fuck? The more, for every bag we secure, we generate enough wealth for them to increase their bag tenfold. Because they print the fucking money. Money doesn't come from nowhere. You talk about earning money, growing your money. Who the fuck manufactures the money? But I digress. Worse than making the money, who defines? And I tell the number one way to create wealth, and the way that I see everyone who created wealth in society, they define wealth. You create wealth by defining what wealth is and then imposing that definition. Because wealth can be anything. Wealth can be the number of head of cattle that you have. Wealth can be cowrie shells. Wealth can be some arbitrary mineral. When the Europeans came to this land, gold was not considered. I mean, they were using gold to pave their road. Gold was a trinket, a pretty trinket you give your darling, but gold was not the center. If you read Cows, Pigs, and Witches, you know, the wealth was the fastest fishing canoe would define who's the richest in society. There were some cultures that defined riches. The wealthiest, greatest man was the man who fed the most people, who would have the biggest fucking mass feeding. People who hoarded wealth would get the death penalties in some culture. So wealth has been arbitrary throughout existence. Throughout existence. There was a time when aluminum foil was worth more than gold. I digress. Yeah, look it up. That's true. But then they came up with a new way of manufacturing. Diamonds. The wealth of diamonds and value of diamonds is completely arbitrary and made up. And every day we turn on the news and we see them manipulating the dollar like it's video game money. In fact, video game currency. There are video game currencies that people are buying in the real world. People are selling video game like a sword in a massive online player game that's worth $100,000, a video game sword. And people are like, well, I'll buy this sword and just hold on to it because that's an investment. That's a secure investment. So instead of having to bank all this money, I'll just carry around this fucking flash drive with this $100,000 digital sword in it. NFTs. JPEGs are now worth shit. Now they're not anymore and they'll come back. Anyway. Panaceas. We have to stop trying to, because it just doesn't work. There is no one singular. Oh, let me put mine. How y'all can send me some fiat though. How you can support is splashing across the stream. But we have to, because there was a time where this was a really popular word. I used to hear it everywhere to a point I was sick of it. And it's holistic. Holistic. They call it totality or total. We call it holistic. Any type of actions that we do to challenge our oppressors and to secure ourselves and our people has to be fully integrated and intertwined with the law, everything else. They did not just come and disrupt our physical bodies. They disrupted our relationships. They disrupted our intimate relationships, our communal societal relationships, our tribal relationships, our national relationships. They didn't just attack our bodies. They attacked our identities. They didn't just attack our armies. They attacked our schools, our libraries. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson, of all people, has said, 95%, or did he say 90? 90 to 95% of our history has been obliterated. And the other 10% that we still have access to has been told to us by our enemies and our oppressors. So we don't even know what the fuck we did or where the fuck we came. Even the scholars and the historians are just scratching the surface. And it's so sad to me that people who build civilizations are now content with building businesses in a fucking unsustainable ecocidal economy instead of creating economies. And when people say create wealth, that is a myth. You can't create wealth unless you define what wealth is. You're using their definition, whether it is their fiat currency or their realist definition of holdings and stocks and bonds and shares. It's their definition. So it's not going to be black businesses. It's not going to be owning land. It's not going to be our weapons, owning guns and buying every black man own a gun. It's not going to be our guns. It's not going to be our intact families, our two-parent family. Yeah, that's another panic. Save the black family. Telling you, as a man, as a father in a nuclear family, this shit, when hey, don't come, it's not going to save us. So two-parent households is another panacea. I'm not condemning or discouraging any of those things. I just want us to stop miscategorizing and distorting what they mean and the impact they have on the larger mission. The only thing really, the fundamental thing is the ideology and our will. If we have the will to say, listen, we will be a free people who will live on a sustained and viable planet. We will not tolerate our oppression, and we will not tolerate the destruction of the planet's ecosystem. Unacceptable. When we can hold that, and that reverberates, and that becomes our fundamental ideology, becomes once again what Marimba Ani says, our cultural germ seed, our fundamental mentality, the core of our identity, being liberated, securing permanent and total liberation and restoration of the planet. When that becomes, then and only then, anything you do, you live in a commune or you out here trying to secure the bag, will feed back into that goal. We have lost the ideological position. You're out here doing ideological work for revolution, and black people will look at you and say, you ain't doing nothing, because we no longer value ideology. And the only reason we don't value and understand the value of ideology is because we fell for their propaganda. There was a time in our community where people were there were struggles. One of the main struggles is say, hey, we're going to be socialist. We're going to be capitalist. We're going to be Pan-Africanist. We're going to be black nationalist. We're going to be Kawaitist. Where we were trying to determine and construct our very identity, because the greatest, as Amos Wilson said, the greatest asset of a people is not their land. It's not their land. He talked about how Japan is a barren rock. Japan is a barren rock with no resources. Great Britain conquered the world, and you be lucky to grow a turnip in Great Britain's soil. While we have Africans starving on some of the most fertile soil. We have Africans impoverished on some of the most essential natural resources. So it is not natural resources that is the greatest asset a people can have. Because we've seen people with no natural resources take over the world, and people with all the natural resources become slaves. It is not the weapons that you have. We have seen malnourished rice farmers, illiterate goat herders. I'm going to say this every show. I don't give a shit if I'm repeating myself. Take on nuclear superpower. Nuclear armed superpowers were broken. Nuclear armed superpower aircraft carrier, that tactical armor, satellite, night vision goggle military get defeated by herdsmen and farmers. They didn't just defeat the United States. The Viet Cong Destroyed a whole fucking generation of white boys. Had white boys in this country streaking, sleeping in alleyways, trying to forget, injecting themselves, trying to forget. Guerrilla movements all over this world beating conventional military forces. So it is not your military. What did these people have? You had China, one of the most ravaged, aggressively colonized places on Earth. After Africa, there's no plot of land that suffered more invasions from more different people. Opium war after opium war, incursion, massacres, famines. What did they have? It's this thing called sinocentrism. When you look at the people who succeed versus the people who don't, it is their asili, it is their ideology, it is their self-perception. That is it. Everything else is a byproduct of that. If your ideology, if your self-perception, if your cultural germ seed, if your collective ambition and goal is not to be free and to have power and to defeat your enemies, all the resources and weapons and money in the world will do nothing. You will hand it over on a silver platter to your enemies. You will weep at your victories and celebrate your own fucking defeat. So what we need to do is synchronize, integrate all areas of human interactions. Everything must be revolutionary Pan-African. Everything must be targeted towards liberation and ecological restoration. That is the goal. That's what we must do. And it has to change our outlook and goals. It's not enough just to do it mechanically. It's not enough to just do the physical action. We need the psychological and intellectual component first and foremost. Bobby E. Wright said you can't enslave a thinking people because they will always be conspiring against you. We don't conspire to overthrow our oppressors. We don't conspire to subvert their agendas. We conspire to extract personal benefits, and seek out security within their systems. Can you imagine if the motherfucking Europeans came up on the Gold Coast, the Ivory Coast, arrived in Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria, Swaziland, and said, I'm on this new land that has a certain economy and has a certain system. These are their politics. And I'm going to integrate and work really hard and outpace them. I'm going to go to the great scholarly halls of Kemet. I'm going to go to the great scholarly halls of Timbuktu and learn and get degrees in their system and outdo them. I'm going to work twice as hard. Can you imagine if they tried to overthrow us by mastering our systems as opposed to simply wiping the slate and imposing their system? It's an open conspiracy. What I'm saying here, they've already understood. It's been so many times that Europeans thought to themselves, God damn, if we let them learn this military science, if we let them get a black billionaires and black people into the special forces, if we gave them if we gave them their own flag and their own nation, they're going to do to us what we did to them. And we didn't. Didn't even try. Mandela gave back the fucking nuke. The Zionists illegally gave a nuke to the apartheid government because the number one ally of apartheid South Africa was Israel. South Africa would have fallen decades before it did. The apartheid government would have collapsed long before. Thousands of black lives would have been saved in Tanzania if not for the assistance given to the apartheid government by Israel. And when you say via Israel, Israel is the 51st state of the United States. Israel does nothing without prior approval from its paymaster. And people really out here believing that Israel controls America when it's the other way around, but I digress. Let's just understand this. African people, collectively, we revolutionary. We have to have a revolutionary value system, revolutionary principles, revolutionary goals, methods, and agendas. Anything short of that is panacea. Anything short of that is not a solution for African people. So if you want to own some land, if you want to work with weapons, if you want to be an engineer, architect, your core value and your core objective is to assert African power, secure African liberation, direct control over the resources necessary for the survival and sustaining of African people, respect for and restoration of the ecosystem. It's not that complex. And the reality is, if we organize to do it, it will get done. It must be Pan-Africanism. Our oppression, racism is not personal. It's not individual. It's not local. It's not even national. Racism is a planetary condition. And we don't make peace with enemies unless you fully defeat enemies. And there needs to be a system in place. Del Jones told us you can't defeat a system without a system. We refuse to establish protocols. We don't even know what to do when a prominent Negro gets up and says, I love Hitler. When a prominent Negro gets up and dehumanizes and degrades African women. When a promising Negro gets up and scams a whole continent, talking about he's going to make a Wakanda on the African continent and ally with Asians and other colonizers to exploit our own. We don't even know what the fuck to do about it. We start arguing about it. We don't know what the fuck to do with religions and belief systems that have committed unyielding atrocities against our people. Are there two Muslims or two Christians anywhere, two non-black Muslims, and arguing about how to properly respect Ifa, Obatala, Amun-Ra, Isis? When they talk about our gods, they say they're demonic, they're devil, they're animist, they're primitive, and leave it. There's no debate. But when we talk about their gods, you can't talk about people's belief system. We never gonna give up their gods. We gonna always worship the gods of our oppressors. I think the fuck not. Not if I have anything to say about it. Anyway, this is BroDiallo broadcast. Not trying to be gloomy. The point of today's discussion, I'm sorry I didn't have time to get to questions. Tune in Wednesday, right here, Wednesday, for Rational Radicals, and I'll definitely make sure that we get time to discuss. But anyway, to discuss questions and answers. I don't know. Oh, Tony. Okay, let's just anyway, I'm caught up in the comments. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. We'll open up for Q&A, and thank you for all of my supporters. And we will see you Wednesday with the Rational Radicals, and we will see you Friday with Earn Your Liberation. I'm just tripping off this comment, this Tony character. He went from 54 million to 4 million, jumping all over the place. Anyway, and let me just say this, because we got some, what I assume, white person in the comments talking about all the millions of people who died fighting America. One thing you can say, whether it is the Warsaw Ghetto, Vietnam, India, people, those who submitted to Western imperialism, had a lower survival rate than those who fought. Those who fight white imperialism and genocidal aggression have a higher survival rate than those who submitted. The people who submitted to Western aggression, many of them have gone extinct. The Arawaks, the Kalinagals. So when white folks come and tell you how many Vietnamese died, how many Chinese died in the war, they don't tell you about how many died in the so-called peace, during the so-called peace. The tens of millions that died in submission and trying to submit and cooperate with Western aggression. They're going to kill you regardless. So you can't really dictate whether you live or die under white hegemony. You can only dictate and determine the terms under which you're going to die, because living is not an option. Europeans are destroying the life-sustaining capacity of the earth. Europeans, their own fucking children, have a movement called Extinction Rebellion. There's not even a place or a future. These fucking crackers are trying to fucking colonize Mars. Spend $1 billion, $1 trillion to colonize a dead planet instead of preserving the living planet you already have. Utter fucking madness. I'm gonna end with